Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are going to take a look at, well, the future of AI hardware, specifically how much power these AI server racks actually need. You sent us a Morgan Stanley research report from November 25th, 2024. And, well, it looks like things are about to get a lot more complicated.
It's really fascinating to see how uh, these increasing power demands of AI hardware are really pushing the limits of current server rack designs. We're not just talking about plugging in a bigger power strip here. It's a complete rethink of power architecture.
So you're saying the old way of doing things just won't cut it anymore. What kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, if you look at the power requirements
Yeah.
of the newer Blackwell GPUs used in GB200 server racks, each one needs a 5.5 kilowatt of power supply unit.
Mm.
Um, Compare that to the older Hopper GPUs, which only needed a 3.3 kilowatt LPSU, and you can see the trend. Everything from power shelves to battery backup systems
Hmm.
is getting a major upgrade just to keep up.
That's a pretty big jump. Can you give us an idea of what these power upgrades actually look like?
Okay, so think about it this way. Imagine trying to power a city block versus a single house. The current GB200 racks have power shelves designed for 33 kilowatts, but the upcoming GB300 racks could handle anywhere from 51 kilowatts to 72 kilowatts per shelf. They're even considering power supply units that can handle 8.5, 10, or even 12 kilowatts each.
Okay, so these are some serious power upgrades. But more power usually means more problems, right? How are they ensuring that these systems are reliable enough to handle all that?
Yeah, reliability is key. And the report highlights a few clever solutions. One is the battery backup unit, or BBU, basically a much more efficient backup power supply.
So it's like a really beefed up UPS for your computer.
Exactly. But BBUs use a DC to DC power supply, which makes them more efficient than traditional UPS systems that rely on AC to DC conversion and those clunky lead-acid batteries. And they're not as expensive as you might think. Each unit costs about 300 to 400 US dollars, and a GB200 rack might need 24 of them.
That sounds like a pretty good deal for that much backup power. But is this technology being used everywhere?
Well, BBU adoption is partially dependent on how a data center is designed. Newer data centers are moving towards high voltage direct current, or HVDC designs, which work really well with BBUs. So we're likely to see them become more and more common as older data centers get upgraded.
So BBUs aren't a universal solution yet, but they seem to be the way of the future. What other innovations are being used to keep these power systems running smoothly?
Well, they're also using power capacitance shelves, sometimes called peak load shaving shelves. These shelves act like shock absorbers for power fluctuations.
Okay, that sounds interesting. How do they work?
They use supercapacitors to manage those sudden spikes in demand. That can happen when GPUs are working at their limit. Think of it like a surge protector on steroids.
So they're preventing those sudden dips or surges in power that could cause problems with the AI processing.
Exactly. It's all about maximizing reliability. These power capacitance shelves are already being used in GB300 prototypes, with companies like Musashi and Delta Electronics working on them.
It's amazing how they are pulling out all the stops to ensure these power systems can handle the load. The report also mentions something about DC power converters, right?
Yes, the design of those is evolving too. If you remember, we mentioned those 5.5 kilowatt power supplies for the Blackwell GPUs. Well, they've actually moved away from integrating the power converter directly into the GPU, like they did with the older Hopper GPUs.
Why would they change that? Wasn't it more efficient to have everything together?
Well, there were some technical challenges with the integrated design. By making it a separate component, they have more flexibility and can optimize the power conversion process, which ultimately leads to better overall efficiency.
So they took a step back in order to move two steps forward.
That's one way to look at it. And the
Hmm.
report suggests that this trend toward discrete solutions is likely to continue. We might even see a move towards vertical power designs, which could save space and be even more efficient.
Vertical power design, so like skyscrapers for power inside the server racks.
It's not quite that dramatic, but you're getting the idea. By optimizing the layout of components, they can improve airflow and use less space. Based on this report, it seems like a real possibility for the future of AI server racks.
Okay, so we've talked about power shelves, battery backups, power capacitance shelves, and the move to discrete DC power converters. Are there any other major changes in how these power systems are evolving?
Well, the report actually describes a concept that could really change the game: the standalone power rack.
So a whole separate rack just for power. What are the advantages of that?
By giving the power system its own dedicated space, you can optimize the power conversion process even further, and you free up valuable space within the AI server rack itself. It's all about maximizing both efficiency and space.
So it's kind of like giving the power system its own luxury apartment so it can really work its magic without getting in the way.
That's a great analogy. And the report suggests this could be a great option. For the GB300 and future Rubin GPU platforms,
All right, standalone power racks definitely sound like the future of AI hardware. But I want to shift gears for a second and talk about what this all means for the listener.
that's an important point. All of these trends, the power demands, the complex solutions, are creating a huge opportunity for companies that specialize in integrated power solutions.
Like Delta Electronics you mentioned earlier.
Yes, companies like Delta are in a great position to benefit from this evolution in server rack power architecture. They have the expertise and the technology to meet the demands of the AI industry.
It sounds like the demand for AI is about to explode. And companies like Delta are going to be crucial in making sure the lights stay on, so to speak.
That's one way to put it. And remember, this is just the beginning. As AI models continue to grow, those power demands are only going to increase. We're going to need even more innovative solutions to keep up.
It's incredible to think about the scale of these AI models we're talking about. The report doesn't go into much detail about what's driving those power requirements, but I'm guessing it has to do with how much data they have to process.
You're absolutely right. AI models are becoming incredibly complex. With billions or even trillions of parameters, training those models requires a massive amount of data and computational power. That's why we're seeing such a huge surge in demand for these high-powered server racks.
So the more complex the model gets, the more energy it takes to run it. It's like the difference between training for a sprint versus a marathon.
Exactly. And just like marathon runners need the right fuel and resources, these AI models need a robust and reliable power architecture to perform at their best.
Okay, so we know AI hardware is getting more power hungry, and engineers are coming up with some pretty clever ways to manage it. But what does this trend mean for the future of AI as a whole?
That's a really important question to consider. This shift towards increasingly complex power architecture raises some questions about how scalable and sustainable AI will be in the long run.
Are we talking about a potential energy crisis in the world of AI?
It's definitely a concern. As AI becomes more widespread, those power requirements could put a serious strain on energy grids. We need to be thinking about energy-efficient solutions and sustainable power sources if we want to avoid hitting a wall.
So it's not just about building bigger and more powerful server racks, it's about finding ways to do it sustainably.
Precisely. The future of AI is inextricably linked to the future of energy. We can't have one without the other.
That's a really good point. I'm also curious about the potential economic impact of all this. The report seems to suggest that companies like Delta Electronics are going to benefit. But what about the rest of the tech industry?
It's very likely to have ripple effects throughout the entire AI ecosystem. As power architecture becomes more specialized, we can expect to see new companies emerge, and existing ones will need to adapt to stay competitive.
So it's not just about the hardware anymore. It's about the whole infrastructure that supports AI.
You got it. The demand for AI talent, for example, is likely to skyrocket. As companies search for engineers who specialize in power architecture and energy management,
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine this trend will have a huge impact on research and development too. If power becomes a bottleneck, there will be even more of a push to develop AI models and algorithms that are more energy efficient.
absolutely. These challenges are going to drive all kinds of innovation in the field of AI, leading to breakthroughs and solutions that we can't even imagine right now.
It's exciting to think about all the possibilities, even though there are clearly some big challenges ahead. It sounds like the shift in power architecture could be a catalyst for positive change in the AI industry.
I agree. Technological advancement rarely follows a straight line. There will always be obstacles and hurdles to overcome,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it so dynamic and fascinating.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the nuts and bolts of power shelves and battery backups to the broader implications for the future of AI. This Morgan Stanley report has given us a lot to think about. But there's one more thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap things up.
What's that?
The report briefly mentioned the competitive landscape in the AI server market, specifically who's building those GB200 servers. It's a bit of a side note. But I think it's worth exploring, especially since we know who's likely to be BUIing these servers.
You're talking about Exhibit 13, which shows NVIDIA's estimated GB200 server supply share for 2025.
That's the one. It breaks down the market share between different manufacturers, and there are some big names on that list.
Yes, the report estimates that FII and Hon Hai will have a combined 54% of the GB200 server supply in 2025, followed by Quanta at 41%, Wistron and Dell are much smaller with just 2%.
Hmm.
And Supermicro rounds out the list at 3%.
So it's a pretty concentrated market, with two companies really dominating the space. What's interesting to me is that the report also gives us some insight into who's actually BUYing these servers, the demand side of things.
Right. Exhibit 14 shows the estimated demand share for NVIDIA's GB200 servers in 2025.
Yeah.
It looks like Microsoft is expected to be the biggest customer with a 40% share, followed by Amazon at 19% and Oracle at 13%. Google and Meta platforms are estimated to have smaller shares, 12% and 11% respectively.
So we're seeing the biggest names in tech on both the supply and demand side of this market. No wonder there's so much focus on power architecture and efficiency. These companies are making huge investments in AI, and they need the infrastructure to support it.
It really shows you where the industry is headed. AI is quickly becoming a core part of how businesses operate,
Right.
and those who can harness its power effectively are going to have a real competitive edge.
This is fascinating stuff. We've gone from the nitty-gritty details of server rack design to the broader landscape of the tech industry in just one deep dive. I always love how these seemingly niche topics can give you such a great view of the bigger picture.
It just goes to show how interconnected technology really is. Every innovation creates a ripple effect, and understanding those connections is essential if you want to navigate the constantly changing world of tech.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to the business impact of all of this for a moment. We've talked about companies like Delta Electronics benefiting from this trend toward more complex power architecture. But are there any potential downsides or risks for these companies?
That's a great question. While the report doesn't specifically address potential risks, we can make some educated guesses based on what we know. One potential risk is the sheer speed of innovation in AI hardware. Companies like Delta need to stay ahead of the curve to make sure their solutions are compatible with the latest generations of servers and GPUs.
So it's a constant race to keep up with the latest and greatest.
It really is. And that can be incredibly challenging, especially when you're dealing with cutting-edge technology that's evolving all the time. Another potential risk is increased competition. As the market for AI power solutions grows, we're going to see more companies trying to get a piece of the pie.
So Delta can't just sit back and relax. They have to constantly innovate and find ways to stand out from the crowd.
Exactly. It's a dynamic and competitive market, which means companies need to be agile to succeed. We also have to consider the broader economic climate. If there's a downturn in the tech sector, demand for AI hardware could slow down, which would have a big impact on companies like Delta that are heavily invested in this area.
So there are external factors that could come into play as well.
Yes, the tech industry is definitely not immune to economic ups and downs, so companies need to be prepared for those potential shifts in demand.
These are all important considerations. It seems like there are both big opportunities and potential risks that come with this trend. It's a good reminder that even in a field that's growing as fast as AI, success is never guaranteed.
That's a great insight. It's crucial to approach these trends with a balanced perspective, recognizing both the potential rewards and the challenges that lie ahead.
We've definitely squeezed every last drop of insight from this Morgan Stanley report. It's been a fascinating deep dive into the world of AI, hardware, and power architecture.
I've really enjoyed exploring this topic with you. It's always rewarding to delve into these complex subjects
Yeah.
and discover the hidden connections that shape the tech landscape.
It makes you wonder, where all of this is headed. With the power needs of AI growing so rapidly, are we going to hit some kind of limit with this technology?
It's a really good question to think about. What does the long-term trajectory of AI hardware look like, especially with these power constraints? Could we reach a point where power actually holds back progress? Or
Yeah.
will engineers find new and innovative ways to push those boundaries even further?
It's almost like an arms race between what AI demands and what engineers can deliver.
That's a great way to put it. And the next chapter of this story is going to be fascinating to watch. Will we see even more radical solutions than standalone power racks? Maybe advancements in energy storage? Or completely new ways to power these massive AI systems?
It's mind-boggling to think about. We could be talking about things like room-sized supercapacitors or harnessing energy from sources we haven't even dreamed of yet.
The possibilities are truly endless, and that's what makes this field so exciting. We are standing on the edge of a technological revolution, and power architecture is right at the heart of it.
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new perspective on how important power is to the world of AI, and I'm sure you listening have been doing some thinking about this too.
What stood out to you is the biggest surprise in this report?
For me, it's that connection between the hardware and the bigger picture of the tech industry. Who would have thought that something as seemingly basic as power could have such a huge impact on companies like Microsoft and Google? They really shows you how even the smallest details can have
Massive implications. Absolutely. And it highlights how interconnected everything in technology really is. As AI continues to grow, we're going to see these connections become even more important.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've squeezed every last drop of insight out of this Morgan Stanley report. It's been a fascinating journey into the world of AI hardware and power architecture.
I've really enjoyed our deep dive today. It's always a pleasure to explore these complex topics and see how they connect to the larger tech landscape.
And for those of you listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your predictions for the future of AI power architecture? Share your ideas and keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.